listening to The Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and Ted Durden, only on LA Talk Radio.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of The Voice of Reason. My name is Ted Durden, a Southern Democrat.
And I'm Mark Reed, a West Coast Republican.
And together we are the Voice of Reason. This is a politically motivated show where civil discourse is the order of the day, where Mark and I believe there are more things that unite us than there are that divide us. And having said that, and as I always do, I toss the ball to my co-host, Mark Reed.
Thank you, Ted. We're going to talk tonight about a subject matter that really crosses all political aisles, and that is our environment. Nobody has the catch on it all.
No, they don't.
Republicans and Democrats, because when something happens drastically within the environment, it affects all of us. What we're going to discuss tonight is the Aliso Canyon well blowout. The natural gas disaster was the number one disaster in the United States history. In fact, actually the carbon footprint exceeded the carbon footprint of the Deepwater Horizon leakage in the Gulf of Mexico.
And that was massive.
That was massive. Now, this blowout happened on October 23rd of 2015, and it took just about 4 months for it to be sealed completely by February 18th, 2016. The facility is owned and operated by Southern California Gas Company, which is a subsidiary of Sempra Gas.
Right.
On January 6th, Governor Brown actually issued a state of emergency because it was so bad, and it affected tens of thousands of people.
Right.
One of the things that really gets me about this gas blowout is the criminal negligence of the operations of this facility. They knew that the 25 wells were leaking. Now, this is SS-25 that had the complete blowout.
Right.
And they eliminated the below-ground safety shutoff valve years prior to that.
Right. Actually, that was done in 1979.
Right.
And those valves were taken off because of the fact that those valves, and these pipes have been in existence since 1953 at that time, so they were already 26 years old. And those were leaking. They took them off, but they never replaced them.
Yeah, Jerry Brown's sister was the chairman of the gas company at the time, and she advocated for price rate hikes to fix these wells.
Mm-hmm.
Once they got the hike and they had the rate hikes for a few years, she advocated not to replace the safety valve, not to fix the gas wells and stop the leakages, and she was given a multi-million-dollar bonus, and she retired. A couple of years after that is when the gas blowout happened. So you look at it and you say, what are our politicians doing? I'm both a Republican and Democrat, because this is not just here in the northwest San Fernando Valley. Nationwide, the gas companies and natural gas companies are using the old oil wells now to store natural gas because they can buy it on the open market. They have to have a place to store it. So in my mind, I don't mind them storing it there in these big bladders underground. However, they need to have regulations passed for the safety, because the old oil wells, the piping systems, were not designed for injection or withdrawal of natural gas.
Right.
So the regulations that it's under the federal purview needs to be implemented to be able to create safe and sound procedures of these types of storages of natural gas.
Right, and the bigger issue is this, and I'm not trying to minimize what happened. The bigger issue is on the national level, it speaks to our failing and decrepit infrastructure. That's the problem, because again, this is piping that had been in place since 1953. At the time the original leak was discovered from the valves, they should have been replaced at that time. So, like you said, she gets the money and doesn't implement the repairs. So again, just leaving the public at risk. And in my mind's eye, hindsight being 2020, charges should have been brought against her for negligence, as far as I'm concerned. When you think about how her negligence and her unwillingness to correct this problem that everybody knew about, and all the families and the lives and the first responders that have suffered horribly as a result of it. And again, it's just beyond the pale to me. I don't understand that.
Well, it's corporate greed and corporate profits. They're going to, sweep things underneath the carpet as long as our elected officials allow it to happen. Now, in 2015, when this blowout took place, everybody asked me my position on it because I was running for Congress at the time against the congressman that had the purview over it. Mr. Sherman.
Right, Brad Sherman,
And
right.
my comments right off the bat was that there should have been a congressional inquiry of criminal negligence with a referral to the Department of Justice for prosecution, because the precedent for criminal negligence actually goes to San Bruno, the pipeline that blew up north,
Right.
where it leveled a good portion of the city and killed quite a few people.
I remember
The
that.
criminal negligence was brought forth. They actually succeeded in the case, and they made massive changes in the pipelines in how to determine whether or not someone were leaking. So
Right.
it made the changes. So unless you make it hurt, the companies that make it hurt, they're not going to change.
No.
And our politicians, because the gas companies spend over $200 million a year on lobbying. So they're buying these individuals off left and right. So they stay quiet.
And because they're insulated.
Yes.
They're insulated.
So we've covered a little bit about the political aspects of it. I want to get into really the human aspects of this.
Yeah,
And
the real
This
tragedy.
is where our special guest is here tonight. But the human aspects of it, there was tens of thousands of people that were relocated, removed from their homes,
Right.
because of the chemicals and the heavy metals in the air that were dropped onto their homes when it just all over the place. I mean, it was in the swimming pools. You could see the oil sitting on top of the pool water.
Right.
Yeah, but there was massive amount of health issues that started springing up. And our guest, Dr. Nordella, has been on the front end of this, doing the research, the testing, gathering all the data, and trying to hold the public officials accountable, but yet they're kind of as slippery as the oil that he's researching right now. And the communities haven't been able to really pin him down.
Well, which is crazy to me, because if you look at it over the expanse of time, you look at the amount of money that Southern California Gas has been fined. They were fined $4 million by the state. They were fined $4 million, I think, by the U.S. government. They paid out about $119.5 million total to a variety of cities and counties.
Right.
But the human aspect of it, the human tragedy, has never been properly addressed. It hasn't been.
You can't make a mother and their children whole when something like this happens and it affects them, because the chemicals and the physical effect actually affects the child even more than the middle-aged.
Well, of course, right, because
they're
they-
absorbing more of it.
Absolutely.
And they're there in the proximity of it more because they don't get up and go to work.
And again, you have to understand the insidiousness of this gas. We're talking methane gas here, and even though it might have a smell to it, you can't see it. And you have no idea, the scientists did it at the time that it happened, other than it was a potential carcinogen. They had no idea what the long-term effects are going to be. I even read a report today where the Southern California Gas came out with a statement, I think it was back in August, indicating that that they actually have data that show there was and will no longer be a public health hazard.
Oh.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
That's one of those blanket statements.
Right.
I want to bring on Dr. Nordella
Sure,
now.
absolutely.
He's the one, like I said, he's been on the forefront of the whole problem, getting all the data, the research, testing. I'm going to have him get into it a little bit further. But Dr. Nordella, will you please join us on the studio? I'd like to do, Dr. Nordella, if you can give us a little short bio of yourself, and then we'll get into the well a little bit for a couple of minutes, and we're going to take a break and pay our bills. But a short bio of yourself.
Yeah, I've been a clinician for approximately 35 years, attended UC San Diego and received a bachelor's in science and human biology. Went on to UCLA Med School, trained in not only family medicine but also emergency medicine. Worked in emergency medicine, and then have been a primary care physician for, again, probably the last 30 plus years.
You had a clinic right there in the proximity of this well blowout too, right?
That is correct.
So you were able to see firsthand the differences pre-blowout
And post.
post-blowout.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. On that note, we're going to go ahead and take a short break to pay our bills, and then we're going to get right into the mud of all of this oil slick garbage that's happened to the northeast San Fernando Valley.
Correct. The Voice of Reason is also brought to you by churchandlaw.com. If you need any legal advice regarding workers' compensation, employment, or labor law, please contact churchandlaw.com. That's 818-230-3110. 818-230-3110. 230-3110. That's Church and Law for any legal advice regarding the workers' compensation, employment, or labor law. Additionally, the Voice of Reason is brought to you by Levin and Albandi Trial Lawyers, 213-232-4848. If you have any workers' compensation, employment, and labor law or personal injury legal needs, call Levin and Albandia. We do have a new sponsor on the Voice of Reason. That would be Paintball USA. If you would like to contact them, call 661-255-5332. That's 661-255-5332 and ask for April at Paintball USA. If you want a fantastic weekend outing for the family and friends, or if you're a corporation looking for that special team building, you have got to check out Paintball USA. Mention the Voice of Reason and get 25% off any regular priced package. Prices start as low as $30 for an all-day package, which includes admission, air gun rental, complete safety equipment, party favors, and 500 paintballs to use accordingly. That's Paintball USA, 661-255-5332. That's Paintball USA at 661-255-5332. And don't forget to mention the Voice of Reason for your 25% discount off all regular prices.
Dr. Nordella, when the blowout first happened, I remember watching all of the rhetoric going back and forth on Facebook. You know, people were quacks, there's nothing to worry about, the air is going to blow it off this way, it's going to go this way. And they really didn't believe the medical issues that were taking place. Can you give us a really brief, not brief, but I'll get into a little bit about the different health issues that you saw showing up immediately?
Well, at that time we had kind of a unique practice. It was both an urgent care and a family practice that people could make appointments. So I saw the appointment side, but also oversaw the walk-in side. And there was a plethora of patients that came in, which was interesting and interested me, is that after doing this for so many years, the symptoms were mixed. So if you expected someone to come in with a viral infection, let's say in the fall, or a flu, they had symptoms of that, but yet they had symptoms of other things. So people would come in with a runny nose, cough, cold, sore throat, but also have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea with a skin rash. And these symptoms did not make sense to me, and they certainly didn't play out as a as a normal seasonal viral issue, and these people were exposed. So we started looking deeper and initiated a clinical phase study 1 in January of 2016, and seen firsthand and examining the patients, doing testing on them and so forth and so on. That went into phase 2 in January of 2017, and the symptoms persisted. And there's a plethora of symptoms from head to toe, and again, did not make sense. And then we moved on to phase 3, which was the urine testing for VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, as well as the hair testing for elements and heavy metals. Okay.
Now, let me ask you a question, so that our listeners and our viewers really get a good, clear idea. Now, I only mentioned one gas that was released, and that was the methane. But wasn't there some additional gases that were released as well, or were there just anything that after the methane were just permutations of that?
Well, I think people should think of this as more like a witch's brew.
Okay.
So it's a combined amount of chemicals within the gas. And it goes from anywhere with they originally thought, which was the mercaptans, which is the sulfur smell odor, and methane, all the way down to toxic crude oil. There was a huge component of particulate matter that was never disclosed to the community. And particulate matter is basically a solid phase and a liquid phase of very, very, very fine particles. They break them up into ultrafine, 2.5 microns up to 10 microns. And they consist of 187 different hazardous air pollutants that cause serious disease as well as cancers.
So when the public health department dove into this, what kind of testing did they authorize? How did they follow up with it? Did they do air testing? Did they do swabs? Did they test all the swabs? Did they test all the air for all the different chemicals that were there? Did they exclude some, and possibly on purpose?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. So UCLA was kind of first on scene very early, tested 7 homes. And basically it's pretty basic. They run an air canister that captures the air, and then they measure it for chemicals. Okay. And then they take a swab, and they'll go into the kitchens or countertops, and they'll wipe down, and they'll put in a bag, and they'll send it to the lab for analysis. What they found is that they were very concerned that a percentage of the homes had N-hexane, which is a toxic chemical, as well as benzene on the countertops. So they wipe, and they measured benzene. Wow. And these benzene levels were quite a concern, and they reported it to the Department of Public Health. Public Health then extended a study to 114 homes, and they used so many as controls about 6 miles away, and 103 were test homes. And they went in, and despite the information that was given to them by UCLA, they did not do the wipe testing for the benzene.
Really?
And there's no logic to that scientifically, in my opinion. Wouldn't everyone want to know that when you're feeding your child their Cheerios in the morning on their countertop, if you had benzene there, that was from this blowout? And
that's a carcinogen, correct?
It absolutely is.
Now let me ask you another question. Because I'm a logical guy. So when the gas leak first happened, and the methane is being just tons and tons a day, 1,200 tons a day, 97,000 long tons. The question is this: were they not aware of what the potential health risk would be to anyone exposed to methane? Did anyone not know that at the time that this occurred?
Well, methane isn't your molecule of concern. Methane is very benign as compared to others.
Okay.
I mean, you have numerous other chemicals. You have BTX, which is the benzene, the toluene, the ethylbenzene, and xanthines. You have the crude oil. You have radon. You have glutaraldehyde, formaldehyde, again, the hazardous air pollution, and then you have toxic crude oil. These people were being showered with toxic crude oil. Now, if you go in and do a literature research on this, this is an incredible concern and should be to anyone's health.
Now, how much resistance did the gas company actually give you on identifying all the chemicals in their, what they used to call their secret sauce? Because didn't they hold that back for quite a long time, so you didn't know what to look for?
Well, I didn't interface with the gas company at all.
Right.
I was waiting for this to become public. But we were told by the Department of Public Health as practitioners in the community to basically ignore any form of symptomatology that was basically nonspecific as that this was not basically to be looked at in regards to air contamination. They said look for other etiologies, and etiologies means causation.
Right.
So why would you do that? That makes absolutely no scientific sense to me.
No, but it certainly makes sense from a liability perspective, where they're trying to avoid liability, and that's obviously what they were trying to do.
Which then creates the footprint back to why is the Department of Public Health, that's supposed to be a neutral agency, protecting the Sempra or the gas company?
Correct.
Now, that's a county agency under the county supervisors.
That is correct.
Okay, so how have the county supervisors been, how would you say, with this problem? Because you have 4 Democrats and 1 Republican in there, and I know that it's been very difficult to get any comments out of them from my perspective.
Well, I've interfaced with the community quite a bit, and the representative in that area is Catherine Barger, and I have never met her, and she has not been in the community that I'm aware of, and the community constantly complains about that. So, again, the question is, these are very bright people. They're smart, they're educated, they have the credentials to show it. When you do things that are so blatantly 180 degrees out of phase scientifically, you can only think of one compelling reason. It's, don't look, don't find, don't tell.
Right.
And then came the cover-up, which is the crude oil issue that's the hot topic right now.
So as a doctor, when they told you to kind of look the other way, that threw up a major red flag. Have you ever had that happen in your lifetime as a doctor?
Never. And not only that, I think something very important, which most people don't know, is that in the time that I was practicing at the clinic, they actually sent a nurse, an RN, out to my office, knocked on the door and wanted to have a face-to-face. And I sat down and talked with her, and she basically asked me to ignore and look the other way. And I said, how inappropriate is that, first of all, as you as a nurse telling me as a physician, and second, you should never guide. Even a physician should really never, ever guide. You should never interrupt the physician-patient relationship, and that's exactly what the Department of Public Health did.
So right now there's been a massive disinformation or misinformation campaign on the whole blowout and what's happening health-wise because of liability aspects.
Correct. And if you look at it, I think I look at it and stand on the foundation that every human should be informed. You have informed consent. Public health should be a neutral agency. They should have done their due diligence. I think they've failed absolutely, totally. And no one was allowed that disclosure. The disclosure is, I have my children here, sir.
Right.
What am I exposed to? What are my risks? What are that? Now, sometimes you can't answer that question, but that was never stated. It was just stated that there was no long-term health effect. And if you look at public testimony, which we recently had by the Department of Public Health, basically they state that, well, it's Simpra's problem because they never disclosed the chemicals. And it's like, well, if they didn't disclose the chemicals, why did you make a statement that there's no long-term health effects?
Exactly, because that was going to be my next question. Has there been any studies whatsoever to determine exactly what the long-term effects of their exposure to this plethora of chemicals is going to be for a parent or for a child? Have there been any data or analysis that have been done?
Yes, actually, we're in the process of it right now. It's just coming to a conclusion, and I do want to say that I have a bond with the community as far as transparency. So first will be released here at this town hall coming up on October 12th.
Okay.
But I'm very concerned, and the studies have shown prior, they've been done. This is not new. This could have been done at the beginning, is just to look at a simple blood count on a patient, to look at the parameters of their white blood cell, their red blood cells, and their platelet counts. And then you can look at other parameters, but the literature is well documented that basically you can have abnormalities of those particular cell lines, which are what they call dysplastic lesions or changes that can be precancerous. So we have concluded about 11,000 tests over 10 years and pulling the data, and that's another issue that should be brought up, because I was working with a lab that disclosed information to me very legally in absolute HIPAA compliance. We went to a second lab because the first lab didn't have enough on the children. And as you mentioned earlier, it's very important is that children get the same dose as the adult. They have a more rapid metabolism rate, and they're going to turn this over quicker, and it's going to affect them more.
Absolutely.
So I went to the lab, and it's called Quest Diagnostics, and I negotiated with them for 6 months. 6 months. Getting ready to hopefully get this data. I had statisticians, everybody ready to set to go, and they had asked me a question. They said, "Are you working with the Department of Public Health?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, to be honest with you, they're not trustworthy." Within a week to two, I got the rejection. They were not going to turn this data over.
Wow.
So even today, I appealed it, went back to them, and unfortunately had to file a lawsuit. It wasn't the proper statute to stand on. We're relooking at examining that now. But we need this data. The community needs this data.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And why they won't give it, it just absolutely is appalling to me.
I think we can all hypothesize why they're not, giving it up. And using the term failure, I don't think our elected officials or the departments have failed. What they're doing is actively covering up known issues and not going down the avenues they should be going down when something does show up. If they're protecting the community, they should see there's an uptick of different kind of rashes, this and that, and they should go down that rabbit hole and find out what's going on and confer with doctors like yourself that are in the area seeing these kids. Because I've listened to several mothers, several young adults that have had massive problems. Even their pets have had problems.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
From this. So it's not a failure of our elected officials. I think it's actual criminal activity.
And it's to me it's just really sad because, and again, nobody is other than Dr. Nordella, nobody is giving any consideration to the human factor. They're just not. It's like, well, they're just collateral damage. That's all they are. They don't mean anything. They don't matter. It's better that we conceal this, we hide this from the public, we keep those from knowing so that we don't suffer any monetary damage. But again, that's the only way that you can affect change. When you have businesses like that, you have to hit them in the pocketbook because that's the only thing that matters to them, is you have to affect their bottom line.
I don't think it's really they're worried about the monetary damages or judgments, because think about it, the gas company is just going to do what? They shift it to the ratepayer. We pay it. We fine them that we pay it. So what they're really worried about is what I brought up in the beginning. It's called criminal negligence, the operations of a facility that is dangerous to the community at hand. That's where they're going to get nailed. That's what they're afraid of, in my mind, that they could possibly, spend some jail time or lose their coveted political seat because they screwed up.
Well, yeah, but then that begs the question. Okay, who would you hold personally accountable? Who?
Well, this goes all the way back to the city councilman Bernstein, I think Bernstein was his name, that originally was there when they started approving all of the housing.
I remember
buildings.
Bernstein, yeah.
They approved all the housing units to be built closer and closer to the oil fields.
Right.
They knew the dangers back then. Then you get into the next city councilman that comes in, the next city councilman, they kept approving these buildings going closer and closer, neighborhoods going closer and closer. So you look at that and you say, yeah, you hold those individuals accountable. But it goes all the way up to Jerry Brown and Jerry Brown's sister.
Right.
And I know the doctors that want to get heavily into the political aspects of it because the political aspects of it really doesn't override the human aspect of it, because there's no way of making the community whole when these elected officials continue to ignore it. And really, their fiduciary responsibility is to protect the community and listen to doctors like yourself. Now, you've gone further into testing. You've even tested the hair.
Yes.
And to find out exactly the differences. Now, first of all, roughly how many chemicals are there that have been identified because of the gas blowout? And name the top 5 chemicals that are the most carcinogen and they have long-lasting effects of little kids, young adults, middle-aged, and older people.
Well, this is a tough question to really answer, and the reason is that, first of all, you have known and unknown chemicals. So of the known chemicals, benzene is probably the worst.
The worst, yes.
But this is a polytoxin exposure. So even when we go in and we look at these blood counts, the question is what's the culprit? And very important that we have no literature to support this very unique combination of chemicals. Nothing out there, because as you just stated, this is the largest, the worst, and the first of this magnitude and combination.
In U.S. history.
So where do we look for guidance? We don't. And it's just interesting. And that's why, the whole issue of running around with meters and trying to measure, which was very interesting, and I'll bring up a point if you'd like me to, it's called the wind study. And the wind study was looked at, probably they looked at some of the old literature, but they looked at new measurements in canisters and so forth. And every government agency was involved, from AQMD and OEA had their opinion. Public Health even ran issues on this, UCLA, GIST, and Cambridge in England. And they looked at the data, and this whole testing was purchased or done by the Department of Public Health. Well, that report was held for 2 years. It was concealed from the public. And when we finally got it, I reviewed it, and there's some fascinating things in there. And the biggest one to me is that they discovered when this field was not active, not extractions, not injections, pressures were down, there were documented fugitive emissions. Now, if there are documented fugitive emissions when this field is not charged, in July of 2017, they pumped that pressure back up. What do we think that's really going to happen to those fugitive emissions? Are they going to go away? No. they're going to increase
and possibly explode.
And definitely exposing these people to these chronic levels of toxins, and just very bad.
On that real positive note, we're going to take our halfway break here to pay our bills.
Very good.
All right. So we'll be back in just a moment.
Hi, I want to welcome Rusty Levin and Harry Nabanian, both trial lawyers for workman comp cases. If you're injured on the job, don't hesitate. Contact an attorney. I did when I was wounded or injured on my job, and I thought I would trust my employer, and it didn't work out quite well, so I found Rusty Levin. Handled my case like a professional, worked out way better than any other lawyer that I talked to would have worked out. So Rusty, tell us a little bit about your company of Levin and Nabanian Trial Lawyers.
So at our firm at Levin Albania Trial Lawyers, we handle all matters of workers' compensation, personal injury, and employment disputes, wrongful termination matters, and things like that. We were able to help Mr. Reed out with his workers' compensation case. Unfortunately, workers' compensation injury can be very stressful, intense situation. And at Levin Albanian, we try to get you the most benefit we can of the law, while also easing the stress and anxiety that comes along with that situation, and getting you back on your feet. My partner, Mr. Albanian, he handles the personal injury sides, and I'll let him take it from there.
And just like all injured employees out there, anybody else who gets injured as a result of somebody else's negligence has rights, and the rights that they need to protect immediately. And they should do that by calling Levin and Albanian Trial Lawyers and letting us help ease that tension off of you and get you the result you deserve, while also making sure that you get better in the progress. So we're here for you, folks.
Levin and Nabanian Trial Lawyers is the best company for you to get a hold of when you're injured or have a personal injury. So give them a call at
213-232-4848, 213-232-4848. Thank you.
And let them handle the stress for you while you recover at home. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
The power of dreams. I am the front man who drives. My power keeps me ahead in the front line. My reputation gets me on the front page. This is how I drive superiority. By being in the front row.
Welcome back to the Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and Ted Durden, and along with our special guest, Dr. Jeffery Nordella.
I wanted to touch upon Prop 65 and also the crude oil that is, because it's an old oil field. And so when you have the gas that's pumped in there and it blows out like it did and spewing, it's the way it was spewing out there. We had toxic crude oil in the air like a microfiber, right?
Yeah, particulates.
Microdust. Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Sure.
How toxic it is?
Well, first, I think to the Prop 65 is that when, Prop 65 obviously tells from the own admission of the gas company that there is cancerous chemicals. So how can Department of Public Health ignore that and say that there's no long-term health effects when you've increased the dosing to the community by an unknown amount? So that's very important. And why they didn't pay attention to that at the beginning, again, amazes me. The toxic crude oil issue is that Public Health has now thrown up their hands, stating they knew nothing about the toxic crude oil, and is pointing their fingers back at Sempra or Southern California Gas when there's absolute literature and documentation on their letterhead talking to the Board of Supervisors, talking about the oily mist, oil in the community found as early as December 17th, 2015, and that this was consistent with hydrocarbons and consistent with crude oil.
Right.
absolutely is just tells me where they're thinking at, and now we're in a position of pointing fingers of who knew what when because of, as you talked about, the issues of liability, guilt, criminality.
The
on
mist
and on.
was so
It's
thick
a
that
shell
I
game.
listened to people talking about that it was visible and feelable on their cars outside.
Absolutely.
That there was an oil slick on top of the swimming pools. I mean, it was that thick over just a couple of days period because they'd clean it up and they'd be back there in a couple of days again.
And I know that I think in December 8th of 2015, I know there was an infrared video that was leaked that showed the massive methane cloud moving through Porter Ranch and surrounding cities.
Now think of that methane cloud and turn that over to a witch's brew, because it's not only methane.
Right.
It's all of these other chemicals, particulate matter, toxic, blah, goes on and on and on, which will all be disclosed at the town hall coming up.
Right, and like I said, because this was an infrared, the gas cloud wasn't visible to the naked eye. So you're walking through it, you're in the middle of it, and you may smell something, but you don't even know.
Well,
You have
until
no
that
idea.
infrared came out, wasn't the gas company really minimizing the cloud and how bad it was? And when the infrared cloud, the tape of that came out, it really showed exactly how bad it was, and they had to admit how bad it was.
Well, but Department of Public Health was taking lead from the gas company saying, don't worry, it's only methane and mercaptans that you're exposed to. And again, not doing their own due diligence, they went along with it, and that's what they sold to the community for a long time. And as we're going to show here in the town hall, the contrast of all of the chemicals that they were exposed to, you will now understand why you have a plethora of symptomatology.
I know Ted has a question, but if any of you in the audience have a question, feel free to call in at 818-570-5085. Again, 818-570-5085, and we'll all be happy, but especially Dr. Jeffery Nordella would be happy to answer your question direct, because you hardly get the opportunity to ask a direct question like this, even if you're not aware of it.
Right.
It's really good to take that opportunity. Ted, you had a question about children?
Well, yeah, I did. Well, I want to let's start at the beginning. Okay, with all the people that were exposed to it, I think it's safe to assume, and all these residents, some of the women were pregnant. So the question that has to be asked is, what effect did that have on the fetus?
Well, the chemicals, when you do an independent research on each chemical, there's definitely these chemicals that the community was exposed to that will cause reproductive abnormalities. And in fact, if you actually look at Prop 65, that's one of the warnings. So it's right there for us. So yes, and there was a latest article that just came out probably about 3 days ago. I haven't reviewed the article deeply, but it talks about air pollutants in women who volunteered postpartum to have their placentas looked at, and they have run assays on them that show these toxins.
Okay, so I guess the next logical question then is, are you aware, do you know of any women that gave birth that was exposed to this witch's brew, and if the children had any birth defects? Are you aware of any?
I am not aware of any. As I said here, I've unfortunately lost my position as the director of the clinic and have been disconnected from some of the patients in the community, but we're trying to reconnect right now through other means. So I apologize, I do not know.
Okay, and as far as based on your intense involvement, what has happened to the children? What have their symptoms been like?
Well, it's a great question, because I think Mark had brought up the issue of that the people in the community are looked at as malingerers.
Right.
So we know that maybe the adult, and there might be some that get on board and want a financial gain. I don't know.
Right.
That's not my job to make that decision. But we look at that and say, just let's apply some logic. Look at the children. The children don't have secondary gain issues like that.
Right.
And go to the schools. The school studies have come out and shown that numerous children were sick, reported to the nurse. They did document some of this. Mothers wanted to move them out of the community. Mothers wanted to homeschool them. They wanted to do any alternative but keep them in school. And don't forget, these schools that are in that area, those children are exposed 24/7.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, they are.
They're not like, us that we get up, we live in Porter Ranch, and then we go down to Los Angeles and we go to work and we come
Right.
home and then we
Gone
spend a
10,
weekend.
12
Right.
hours out of the day.
Exactly.
The children are there 24/7. Even if
Absolutely.
they homeschooled them in the house, that's still
They-
getting
right.
into the house.
Absolutely. And again, I think a good point is benzene in itself. When you take benzene in, and back to the crude oil, there was no documentations that I could find that actually laid out the benzene exposure through the toxic crude oil. When a toxic crude oil showers your skin, the benzene is actually absorbed through the skin into the
Right.
bloodstream. How was that accounted for? It was not.
Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, we have friends, family, there's known associates that work in the oil fields, in Texas or Oklahoma or what, and they're exposed to crude oil all day long and they don't get sick like that. What is your response to that? Because isn't that some of the data that's collected all the time through the oil companies? Is it different than when natural gas is applied and the chemicals that they put into the natural gas?
Well, unfortunately, even the literature is poisoned. I mean, I can pay to have literature developed and placed in a magazine, and there's hundreds of magazines, medical magazines. So I think that's important that we think about that. But I think that if you do the true literature research, you will find a significant amount of information that supports well the proximity of people living to these facilities have increased risk of particular illnesses and diseases, and it's well established.
Yeah, whether it's breathed in, through the air, or whether it's on their skin, because you look at over here in Highland Park.
Yeah, Highland Park, right.
Where they have the oil wells over
Oh,
there.
yes, yeah,
There's
right.
a higher cancer rate over there, isn't there? I believe there is.
Well, it's interesting because I've tried to interface with the National Cancer Data Bank and got so far and then blocked out. We have this censorship that goes on, and it's beyond my understanding. It's like we're talking about the health and safety of people. Now, granted, they don't want to release it to someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, but if you're credentialed and you're doing the proper research, this data should be available to all clinicians or clinical researchers so we can actually draw this conclusion. Otherwise, these conclusions aren't being drawn. And you have censorship, and you get back to that basic principle. Does the human have the right to know and disclose so he can pick up and move or stay there?
Well, I believe the doctors definitely have a right to know so they can
Right.
properly treat their patients and
Yeah, because they're on
identify the issues that their patients are coming in with.
Right, because they're on the front line.
Yes,
I
and
haven't-
on that note, we're at the three-quarter break now, Ted. We're
really?
enjoying this
Wow.
conversation so
I
much,
tell you,
but we
okay.
still have to pay our bills.
Still gotta do
regardless,
that.
So you're at the bat, Ted.
Okay. The Voice of Reason is brought to you by churchandlaw.com. If you need any legal advice regarding workers' compensation, employment, or labor law, please contact churchandlaw.com. That's 818-230-3110. 818-230-3110. That's Church and Law for any legal advice regarding workers' compensation, employment, or labor law. We also have a new sponsor on The Voice of Reason, Paintball USA. Call 661-255-5332. That's 661-255-5332 and ask for April at Paintball USA. If you want a fantastic weekend outing for the family and friends, or if you're a corporation looking for team building, you have got to check out Paintball USA. Mention The Voice of Reason and get 25% off of any regular price package. Prices start as low as $30 for an all-day package, which includes admission, air gun rental, complete safety equipment, party favors, and 500 paintball to use accordingly. That's Paintball USA at 661-255-5332. That's Paintball USA 661-255-5332. And don't forget to mention The Voice of Reason for your 25% discount off of all regular prices. And we are also brought to you by Levin and Albandian Trial Lawyers, 213-232-4848. If you have any workers' compensation, employment, and labor law or personal injury legal needs, call Levin and Albandian at 213-232-4848. And The Voice of Reason is also brought to you by Honda. Now, having said that mouthful.
Yes, exactly. That is a mouthful, but we do have to pay our bills.
Yeah, that we do.
This natural disaster, not natural disaster, man-made disaster,
Correct.
realistically, because of the negligence of the operations of this facility, is really a case study for the future of what is going on. So it really is to the benefit of the oil companies and the gas companies to suppress as much information as possible. You agree to that?
Absolutely.
I've heard several cases where it's affecting the elderly. You know, when we're younger, you know, in their 40s, and I'm 62, you know, we can process it a little more. And that's why I want to get into what chemicals don't come out of your body. They stay there forever. Like I know radion is one of them. Benzene is another one that stays there. What on the elderly? I know a lot of people said they have died because of this. They are blaming this because they were pretty much healthy older people in their late 70s or early 80s. All of a sudden, wham! They got really sick and they died. Do you believe that that's true? That this gas blowout really has attributed to some deaths of the elderly?
Oh, I'm sure it has. The problem is that, you know, I have to speak with a science mind, so I need data.
Right.
And I can't get at the data. And one of the, you know, problems, but I totally understand, is, you know, this is an active litigation.
Yes.
So, you know, the plaintiff counsel is going to protect that, and they're going to look at that. It's unfortunate because I would love to be able to get these numbers
Right.
and to look at that. But, you know, yes, the body, you being ill, somebody has asthma, somebody has COPD, and you pump all of this down their respiratory tract. Can we honestly think that's going to be good for them? Of course not. Of course
Right. Right.
Of course not. And everybody has different genetics. So it's the genetics that lead to the ability to metabolize or help ward this
A
off.
lot of moving factors in the human body.
Absolutely, and you have to take that into consideration. But an interesting thing came up from a study, and I really want to applaud her. It was Diane Gonzalez did a study, and one of the facts that she came up with is that they found that the chemicals were concentrated in particular areas of the hillsides. So depending on temperature, pressure, cracks, crevices, so forth and so on, it concentrated in area, but they correlated that with people who had symptoms. And I thought that was, you know, we thought it, but she has actually shown it.
I had a quick question for you. Okay, we can all agree that nobody, not Sempra, not the gas company, not the city, not the state, were prepared to deal with this sort of avoidable man-made disaster. So that leads to another question. Are there similar storage facilities ran by the Southern California Gas where this potential problem could arise there as well?
Yeah, and I don't want to speak to things I don't know of,
Okay.
but I think, you know, we did look at Playa del Rey as well, and unfortunately we didn't have, I think, enough data, but it's again concerning. I do want to mention one thing, though, too, that you triggered my mind, is to mention the firefighters.
Oh, yes.
The firefighters actually came to me and were in question of what was going on with their bodies.
Right.
So I went and met with them. I've been an advocate for the fire department as a paramedic liaison doc, as an ER physician. I still volunteer for functions they have. Good, solid group of people. The worker bees are good people. So we went and talked to them. Symptomatology was the same. They're now in active litigation as well.
Right.
But how can we do that to our firefighters, our first responders?
Right, and it's interesting that you say that, because I did read that on August 20th that now the number of firefighters that are suing the gas company has risen to 55, and they absolutely felt that they've been betrayed. Like you said, they're the first responders. Okay, they show up on the scene before anybody else. They were there to help the residents evacuate, and they were not told what the potential effects could be being exposed to this witch's brew. And I love that phrase, to this witch's brew. Yes. So now they're suffering as well. So yeah, I can understand why they feel betrayed about that. But
well, let me give you another point of betrayal with the firefighters. The firefighters are very well equipped with all of this, and if we had known that there was toxic crude oil being spread upon the community, it was a real easy cure. or preventative
Or a
cure.
mask.
You wear a P100 mask.
Right.
What do the rigs have on them? All of the rigs have P100 masks
They
on
sure
them.
do.
So
They sure
when
do.
they're out there running these calls, and whether you've been a firefighter for 30 years, you still get your blood pressure up a little bit every time you go out
Right.
on a call.
Right.
You're circulating, you're breathing deeper, on and on and on.
Right.
Why not just put that on? And also, why not tell the community?
Yeah.
Why not put it on your child
Yeah.
so they're not exposed to these toxins? Nothing was disclosed. Nothing was mentioned.
See,
And
that's criminal all in itself. My family are cops and firefighters, and one of my cousins retired. The month after he retired, he was identified with lung cancer and died 6 months later. The firemen are exposed to a tremendous amount of chemicals just going into burning buildings. But then to add a known issue up there and not say anything, to me,
Right.
it's criminal. It adds to that criminal element of negligence.
yeah, and you throw in the fact too that they do have gas on site. They have to fuel their trucks, so they both have regular and diesel, which is oil and
Right.
benzene,
Mhm.
and then you dump all of this rest of
Well,
them.
they even have changed the operations in the fire stations that they have. What do you call it? They suck up the diesel
Absolutely.
fumes and
Right.
blow it out.
Absolutely.
Because they found out those diesel fumes are creating cancers of the firemen
Of the firefighters,
in
yeah,
the
they do.
firehouse.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so they know this stuff. Just a matter of how do you, like you say, informed consent of what you're being
Yeah,
into. The
yeah.
gas company should have that information with the county supervisors. So when any kind of a natural disaster like this happens, we have massive informed consent of what's happening within the community, within the first responders. I would also like you to take a moment, because we're right here at the top of the hour. We're about ready to wrap it up. You are going to have because we just touched this. We could probably sit here on this radio show for 4 hours and discuss all the information.
Absolutely.
And we've really only touched the tip of the iceberg. I know that, and I know a lot of the people that have tuned in the Porter Ranch area going, you didn't touch this, you didn't touch that. But you're going to have a very exclusive town hall meeting that's going to get into the nitty gritty and really, because I've watched the videos and they're amazing. And it's so technical, your brain blows up, actually. But tell us when the town hall meeting is, nice and slowly, and where it's going to be, and if you have a website that they can go to get the information as well. That's even more important.
It's going to be at the Freedom Church, which is in Chatsworth at 9200 Owensmouth. It is going to be on October 12th. It is going to be from 2 to 5, and hopefully it's not exclusive. I'm sending open invitations.
Exclusive of the
Absolutely,
information.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right, okay.
And
This is not a political football thing.
well, speaking of that, every politician is getting a personal invitation by myself to sit there, and we'll see who shows.
Yeah, if they do show up, I'll be surprised, because I think they'll be afraid to show up because of the question that I'm sure they're going to be peppered with.
Well, the political football is that the community is divided. Half of them want to shut the facility down. I know that through your expertise and your expert conclusion is that it should be shut down because of what's happening. But the politicians look at it and say half the community want it shut down, the other half don't think so, and so a politician stepping into that witch's brew think, I'm going to piss off half of my people to vote for me, so
Right.
I'm not going to even comment on this.
Right.
So I doubt very very many people will show up. Do you have a website that they can go to and get the information of when the town hall meeting is going to be?
Actually, we don't, but the Facebook, will tell it all. You can just go in there and do the Aliso Canyon Blowout.
Aliso Canyon Blowout.
Correct, and
on
the
Facebook.
information will be there.
It'll be
But
right there.
we hope to have a good turnout, and we have a huge facility. It's beautiful, state of the art, and very comfortable. So, and we'll have some coffees and cookie.
There you go. And I'm
Sounds
personally
good.
asking everybody in the San Fernando Valley, because you think it may not have affected you, but a lot of these chemicals are staying in your system, and you need to find out and be informed. Even if you're in West Hills, Woodland Hills, across the valley from Porter Ranch, it affected everybody because the wind blew this stuff throughout the San Fernando Valley.
Right.
But not only that, you will add to the support of the victims of this natural gas blowout by being able to call your elected officials and say, you know what? Get off the stick and do something about this. Stand up for the community that you represent. Stand up against the gas company and the oil companies and tell them to clean this mess up. Tell them to make people whole. Tell them to stop holding information back and allow everybody to have that informed, massively informed, how would you say, repercussions of this gas blowout in the West San Fernando Valley. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for allowing us into your homes, into your computers, into your cars, into your cell phones. And I look forward to seeing you next week on The Voice of Reason, where we're going to have two moms. We're dedicating some time to this Aliso Canyon blowout. Two moms are going to come on, and they're going to talk about what their firsthand experience is with their children, with themselves, fighting for information, fighting for conclusions of this natural gas blowout that could have been prevented. Ted, bring it on home.
And I think you're doing that. I think that's really important, because I think with all the political talk that we've had and with all the medical information that Dr. Nordella has shared, we really need to put a human face on this. We need to put a human face on this. And that's what we're going to do at the next show. So you guys be sure to tune in. You've been listening to The Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and myself. The Voice of Reason has been brought to you by TurchinLaw.com, by Honda, by 11 Nalbandian Trial Lawyers, and Paintball USA. And as I always close out the show, and this program, this podcast is especially true, ignorance only prevails when rational minds sit back and do nothing. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you.
You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and Ted Durden, only on LA Talk Radio.